Sprouse. It's Sunday night. It's 8 o'clock. It's where we're supposed to be every week like this. We missed you last week. We had a little technical problem and got it all fixed out. Only took about 4 days. We have a lot to talk about tonight here on the Bible Forum. We're going to give you a rundown of the current events, all of it looked at, viewed from a biblical perspective, because this is the Bible Forum. It's a faith ministry supported by God's people through free will offerings. The gifts are tax deductible. You can just click the link on this page. It'll take you to a PayPal button, and you can do that, or you can send a check. A lot of people do that. Some people do that. Email me, thebibleforum@gmail.com. I'll give you an address. What made news this week as you were running around doing all the other things that you normally do? Well, the Vatican warned us on Friday that it has nearly depleted its financial reserves from past donations. The Roman Catholic Church is running out of money. You don't believe that. They don't have the money to cover the budget deficits over the recent years. COVID, perhaps, some other things. They're urging that people continue to faithfully keep the Holy See afloat and Pope Francis's ministry going. Vatican published its 2021 budget, which is apparently a new thing. Never published it much before. It's their latest effort at greater financial transparency as a result of the €50 million budget deficit this year. It's interesting how that happens. The purpose is to reassure donors that their money is being well spent. This following years of mismanagement that is currently the focus of a Vatican corruption investigation. Somebody turned the light on, and now they're telling you what's going on. Francis's economy minister, the Reverend Juan Antonio Guerrero Alves, said the coronavirus pandemic, which reduced donations as well as revenue from the shuttered Vatican museums, would contribute to a projected 30% reduction in revenue to €213 million in 2021. That's €307 million less than 2019. He noted the Vatican had achieved significant cost-cutting during the lockdown last year, which drastically reduced travel, consultation fees, conference and assembly costs, and putting off unnecessary real estate repairs, maintenance, and all that sort of thing. Unnecessary repairs that were planned for this year. In an interview with Vatican media, Guerrero said he expected to further cut expenditures by 8% in 2021 without resorting to layoffs, which the Pope opposes. 8%. That's pretty much small change, percentage-wise, if you want to continue to operate. But even then, the €50 million deficit expected for 2021 will require, once again, dipping into reserves of past donations to cover expenses. Guerrero, I can't say that. Guerrero, Guerrero. Anyway, he confirmed that in 2019, the Vatican used €27.2 million in Peter's Pence, something I don't understand, Peter's Pence reserves. This was to cover operating costs on top of the €53.8 million in revenue to the Peter's Pence Fund that particular year. These are huge numbers being thrown around. Numbers thrown around like, well, President Biden's crew. ProphecyNewsWatch.com told us this week about a same-sex marriage and the rest of the LGBT agenda that has gone mainstream. Things like polyamory. That's when you can have more than one mate or more than one wife or husband. Polyamory has been lurking around the edges of the movement as one of the next social causes being prepared that it might be sprung on us, the mainstream. Now, Cambridge, Massachusetts has followed Somerville in correcting the great injustice of discrimination against polyamory and polygamy. The City Council of Cambridge, Massachusetts has approved an ordinance altering the city's current statute to allow for domestic partnerships between 3 or more adults. The definition of domestic partnership in Cambridge was rewritten to be, quote, the entity formed by 2 or more persons who are not related and must register as a relationship of mutual support, caring, and commitment, and intend to remain in such a relationship. What if somebody was simply letting others sleep at their home? Would someone in the neighborhood complain to the city of Cambridge? And how would all this work out in real life? On the other side of this thing, maybe another twist to it, Pastor Terry Murphy of Victory Church in Regina, Saskatchewan, is under fire by LGBT activists for March 6 online sermon defending public sexuality. He noted that today's trans movement and the promotion of gender fluidity can be a form of child abuse. LGBT activist Terry Van Mackelberg discovered the sermon and was apparently shocked, as well as offended, to discover that a Christian church had not yet changed its teachings to align with its lifestyle and identity, one that has now organized both a Sunday protest in front of the church, drawing on comrades from Regina and Saskatoon, as well as an application under the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code, which protects a person's right to equality without discrimination based on age, religion, sexual orientation, or gender identity. All of that according to CBC News. It's a spear with a point on both ends. The LGBT movement, which is capable of blitzkrieg-level mobilization in cases like this, managed to drum up over 840 co-plaintiffs for the application in only 2 days. At their behest, local politicians have obediently labeled the sermon transphobic and homophobic, and Regina businesses eager for cheap virtue signaling, as well as businesses not willing to be boycotted, began posting pride flag profile pictures on social media. It says sticks and stones, at least so far. It's simply talk and internet postings, which everybody with an IQ over 45 ought to know is just pure bunk. There are people who know nothing that isn't on Facebook. But that's their life. It's not really life. Have you heard of the religious KKK? Christian Headlines posted an article this week from Senator Dick Durbin, and it reads, Democratic Senator Dick Durbin. Don't you just love that? When you think people who make their living writing would know the difference between a Democrat and a democratic idea. I know. The senator compared opponents of the Equality Act to members of the KKK, saying we have to have limits on what people can do in defense of religious liberty. Durbin's a senator from Illinois, made comments at the conclusion of the Senate Judiciary Committee's hearing on the Equality Act, which would amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by adding sexual orientation and also gender identity to the list of protected classes for public places and accommodations, education, housing, and employment. Oh, and President Biden supports it. 2 panelists on Wednesday told senators that the Equality Act would lead to the government closing or punishing thousands of faith-based organizations. Al Mohler, the president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, said in a recent column, the Equality Act represents the greatest present threat to religious liberty in the United States. At first, Durbin compared the situation to the fight in the 1970s for the Equal Rights Amendment. 50 years ago, he said, fresh out of law school, I went to work for the Illinois State Senate. I met a woman named Phyllis Schlafly. She was leading the charge against the Equal Rights Amendment. Of course, the Equal Rights Amendment was never ratified in time by the states. Durbin then referenced the KKK. On a religious aspect, he said, of this, I'm going to tread very carefully and lightly, just to say, I do not believe some of the things that have been suggested as the products of the Equality Act. I do believe that those who want to blatantly discriminate and use religion as their weapon have gone too far. We have to have limits on what they can do. He's talking about you, talking about Christians, men and women, who argue against mainlining homosexuality. I might remind us that the KKK was not burning question marks. They were burning crosses. They were making some distorted connection with religion, and God forbid that anybody would buy into that. We don't need that in America, regardless of the time, regardless of the organization, wherever they come down on the political spectrum, he said. And I hope that we can come together with conversations that will lead us to positive conclusions on this matter. John Fay, a professor of American history at Messiah University in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, criticized Durbin for the KKK comparison. He said it was fanning the flames. Fay thought some opponents of the Equality Act were fanning the flames too. He wrote, as I recently told CBS, there are no simple solutions to this debate. It pits the 14th Amendment, civil rights for all Americans, against the First Amendment, religious freedom. It seems like both sides are too often talking past each other. He said, I want the supporters of the Equality Act to say more about how it will influence Christian organizations than uphold traditional views on sexuality. I want the opponents of the Equality Act to talk more about LGBTQ rights. Now keep in mind the resistance to mainstreaming homosexuality is rooted not simply in religion, in this case biblical Christianity, but rather the twin issues of moral degeneracy and biblical warrant, both of which have been thrown out by the supporters of homosexuality for all the obvious reasons.